It's 5:23. We have 7 hours until midnight to start this new year. And as Mark mentioned this morning of having a New Year's resolution, and didn't see very many hands go up, I encourage you, and I hope this lesson encourages you to have a New Year's resolution, because that's what I'm going to be focusing on this evening. And it's important to have a New Year's resolution because it helps you set a goal, a focus, so to say, on how to improve yourself. And only you know how to improve yourself. Now, as we see in this section of text, and I know it's very lengthy, and I apologize for that, but it's a good section to really look at. And there's 3 points that I want to kind of go through. And the first one is that we should seek the things above, right? As that is our focus. That is our end destination. And we see this in verses 1 through 7. Now, our focus as it is of things above, but our minds also have a weird way of playing with us, so to say. There's this phenomenon called I'm going to butcher this, the Barber-Meinhof. It's a phenomenon of more so if you were ever seeking to buy a new car, or you did buy a new car, and you're like, wow, I've never seen this car on the road, and yet when you buy it or you're looking into it, you just seem to notice them everywhere. That's what this phenomenon is. There's a name for it. And what it is that before you were searching or looking, or you actually bought something, an item, your mind was never really focused on it. So there's no purpose for you to ever recognize it, to remember it, or to take note of it. And so once you do start to take note of something, you start to see it everywhere. You start to see that item, that car, everywhere. So much so where you can go to a third-story building and look at a parking lot, and you can just sit there and pick out that car everywhere in the parking lot. Before, you didn't have that ability, or that focus to do so. And so when we set our focus on something, it then allows us to be able to pick out the good and the bad. When we look back at our lives, we're able to see what was good and bad as we've lived through it. But then also when we look at ourselves, we can then see what is good and bad within ourselves. So have that focus. We see in Romans 12:2, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. Colossians 3:2 says, set your mind on things above, not on the things on the earth. We need to be intentional with what our mind is focused on. Do we focus on things of this world like money, items, personal desires, or are we focused on things above? We may get distracted or confused, and that stops us from what we're focusing on. We have that mentality of a dog, squirrel. We need to have that focus. And when we do lose our focus, have something that we can lean back to that brings us back to our goal, brings us back to our resolution, brings us back to knowing why we're working so hard for, knowing that it can bring us to be a better version of ourselves. As this coming up year, we may look at this past year like, wow, I can't believe I even survived this one. We have to look at this new coming year as one that we can take full control. We can own it. It could be yours. It could be your year. Start off strong, knowing that you can make it be whatever you want it to be, which you can. Going into the year knowing that, wow, this one totally destroyed me and this one's going to do the exact same thing, you're already setting yourself up for failure. Having that focus and that mindset right off the bat makes all the difference. So focus on your plan. Focus on your goal. For Colossians 3, verse 2, set your mind on. This is, this is in the imperative. So it's a command. It's of great importance, one that we very much do. Set your mind on the things above. Now, I could say, set your mind on God, and let that be it. But there's clearly far much more that we must do as Christians. We should know what we should set our mind on, and what we should not set our mind on. In Matthew 16, verse 23, I find this very interesting. This is where Jesus says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's." So we see we are to set our minds on the things that God's interests are. That's where our focus should be. The interests of God. What does God find as of great interests? Well, we'll of course dig into that more. But that's the direction we have to have and the focus we are to have. In our text of Colossians 3, verse 5, it states that we should consider our bodies dead to immorality, impurity, passion, evil desires, and greed, which amounts to idolatry. This means that we should not even have these things in our mind. They should not even be in our focus. They should be far from us. So these are the things that we should not have as our interests, as God does not see these as in his interests. And being interested in the same thing as God is something that we should consider throughout our whole day, all the time, every time. We should ask ourselves, is this something God would take time for? Is this something God would approve of? Is this something that benefits me or others to benefit God? Setting our mind on the interests of God is a beginning focus that we should have. Once we have our mind set in that right direction, it is easier to start, it is easier to execute, it is easier to follow through to the end of our end goal. So where do you put your focus? Is wherever you put your focus, that's where you're going to end up. That's where you're going to go. Because you focused on it so much and you dedicated your life to it, you will get there. And having a mind continually on things that are of the same interest as God will naturally help us grow spiritually to God. Not only is it our focus and thinking, but it becomes a part of us as we start to live in it and through it. And we start to seek opportunities that makes us uncomfortable. Opportunities like studying with someone, meeting new people, starting a conversation about God daily. Back in 2020, I believe, around there, I did a little survey, personal survey of myself. And it was in California, and I kind of tried to do my best to keep track of people I passed by, people I talked to that I had conversations about God. And of course, I was saddened to find out that the people I had conversations about God with was very low. It could have been so much higher. I had so many opportunities because I found I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people. And I definitely could have had more conversations based off of places I went, activities I was doing. Going through a grocery store, it's kind of amazing when you have this in your mind. You're going through and you're like, I need to have a conversation with someone, or I want to have a conversation about God with someone, and you're just going about your day and you're grabbing your items and you're gone. Everyone else in the store is like an obstacle. You just have to get around them. But having a mindset of knowing that you want to evangelize, and that's your focus, you find yourself a little bit more happy because you want to approach them with a smile. And you're trying to be caring and loving and helpful. And you start to end up finding yourself in a better mood overall. That's my conclusion of when I did my own study. But I realized I definitely need to reach more people and start those conversations. Start being uncomfortable to grow. And next we start to see that we are to put aside the old self in verses 8 and 9. Now, every time I think of putting aside the old self, I kind of think of this movie, Rango. And it's about a chameleon. And he's a pet that gets left behind because his family is moving, and he is dumped in the middle of a desert. Well, there's a scene, as Johnny Depp plays as the chameleon, the scene where he's out in this beating sun, his habitat is broken, and so it's so hot he shrivels up, and then he sheds his skin, and then he shrivels up again, and he sheds his skin. He does this like 5 to 6 times, right back to back. I find that it's very funny, but it also kind of puts a picture in my mind that we need to shed our skin. We need to grow, right? When a chameleon or any other, like a snake or a reptile, when they shed their skin, it's because they're growing. And when they also shed their skin, they're releasing all the dirt and the grime, and it makes their skin softer and more vibrant and new. They're able to put the old self away so they can grow into their new skin. In verse 8 it says, "But now you also put them aside, anger, wrath, malice, slander, abusive speech from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you laid aside the old self with evil practices." Now, we don't, as humans, shed in that fashion, like a chameleon or other reptiles. But we can make the choice to change our behavior, our habits, that are not allowing us to get closer to God. Now, there's a list of characteristics that we are to put away, leave behind, like that skin. There's more examples like anger, wrath, malice, abusive speech, and lying, as these are seen as evil practices by God. And since we are setting our mind on things above, we should also see these things as evil. Because if we're going to have the same mind as God, we can't see any of these as not evil. We have to have the same mind as God. And with that having the same mind, these are things that we should put away. And putting away some of these evil things may be hard for some and easy for others. But having a focus in the right place and dying to these habits will help us grow spiritually. Now, you may be personally struggling with some characteristics that were listed. But when we started with honest reflecting and self-reflecting to figure out where we are weakest, you will know which ones that you need to focus on more. And once you've fully accomplished overcoming that struggle, you can then work on the next and work on the next until eventually you find yourself pretty close to getting rid of all of these things. So reflecting on the year and ourselves is a good thing. It helps us see where we have grown and where we have fallen short. Reflecting only becomes a problem when you dwell on the past. When you focus on something that you have done wrongly, and yet you live in it. We should know that we cannot change the past, and so we should move on and learn from it so it doesn't happen again, and that we can grow from it and accept it, own up to it. Now, we may find ourselves overcoming a sin problem in one area of our life, but may not notice that we are sinning in another way. Reflecting helps identify those areas so we can be a better person, be a better version of ourselves. And then, once we put away the old self, we see in verses 10 through 16 that we are to put on a new self. Doing new things like going to a new place, public speaking, teaching, doing a one-on-one study, doing things that you're completely uncomfortable and have never done before can be very scary. It causes discomfort in the fact that it's new to you. You don't know if you're doing it right. You don't know if you're going to say the right thing, say the wrong thing. It brings a lot of worry, as I am right now. But knowing that these moments and these times, you only grow. You only learn from. You gain experience. You gain comfort. I remember someone telling me that they got good at one-on-one studies with people because they did it as much as they possibly could. And they said they had to fail at one-on-one studies, especially when they're trying to convert someone that was Catholic or Mormon. And they said they've had lots of discussions where they were stumped. And so what they did is they took those moments where they were stumped and they studied it and learned how to correctly reapproach it. So when that came up again, they know how to respond correctly. If he never went out and studied with those people, he would have never learned how to correctly teach someone. We need to put ourselves in those positions daily so we can be able to correctly teach someone. And hopefully when we get to that point, we'll find ourselves not being stumped as much. It may happen now and again, but not as frequently as it does now when we are starting. So we must put on this new person, this new self. Putting on, as we see, a list of things, as putting on a new heart of compassion, humble, kindness, gentle, patience, bearing one another's, and forgiving one another. Putting on a new self does not just mean perfecting one area, but perfecting everything as we possibly can. We might be gentle in one area, but are we forgiving? We may be patient, but are we humble? Again, it's the perfect blend of all of these things that we need to work on and focus on, as these are things above. Now, the next we are to put on love. Above everything else, love. 1 Corinthians 13:13 says, "But now faith, hope, love abides, these three. But the greatest of these is love." Love has different forms. And here is the agape love, the unconditional love. And the love of a father and a child, and the love of the mother to a child, is unbreakable. It's untying bond of unity that we have for one another. It's what we have here. And what we must let happen is what we also see next in this list. We must let peace of Christ rule in the heart. There is no need to start strife and quarrels. Why cause problems when there's no benefit to it? Peace is what we can find when we put on the new self. Let the word of Christ richly dwell in you. When we come together to teach, to learn, to sing, we are building each other up. And I hope I am encouraging you, as you guys encourage me in various ways, to continue on being uncomfortable to grow. Encouraging is one that, as a family, does. And that we are thankful for all that we're able to give. And so, with this new year approaching in 6 hours, I hope I didn't preach for a whole hour, but I encourage you to set goals, set resolutions, and in doing so, have accountability. Find someone to study with regularly, to hold you accountable. Find ways to help you set the goals that you set to keep you on track, so you can stay focused, so you can grow spiritually, as I hope that is on your top priority for this new year, growing spiritually. Earlier I said nothing changes if nothing changes. If you want to make spiritual growth your goal in this new year, then it will take some personal and internal actions. Find ways to add God's word into your day. Find ways to serve others. Take time to talk about Jesus with people. In order to change your life, there has to be change. And it can be small changes. It is known that you taking a different route to work makes your day different, because it's new, it's different, it's a breath of fresh air, so to say. Even though that new route may take you an extra 5 minutes, taking that route improves your productivity at work, because you're seeing that day being different than the other. It's different than your daily routine. So finding small things like waking up early and running, stretching, taking a cold plunge in the morning, are all ways that you can start off that day new and different. And that way, you can have that fresh air look of that day, to be able to be encouraged to move forward and do things differently. But of course, then that means you also have to make big changes. If your job is wearing you out, stressing you out, you may need to make that big change of changing careers, jobs, knowing that it can benefit you to be more happy and relaxed and at ease. A change in buying a new house or whatever it may be. Those big changes in life can help you to be better in your mood and your activities. So making big changes as in your spiritual life. Again, as we pointed out, teaching class is probably a big one around here. We need teachers. We need help. Being able to serve in any other way that you can push yourself into can be big changes to help you grow spiritually. So I encourage you to make those big changes. And if anyone here wants to take that first step to make a big change and to start to follow the Lord, I ask you to come forward. And if anyone needs encouragement and help and to continue on in their walk with the Lord, I ask you to also come forward as we stand and sing.